Hi guys, welcome back to part 2 of my Tableau course. I'm Emily Chang, by the way. In the last video, we went over how to create pie charts, word clouds, and tree maps. In this video, we will be learning how to create histograms and how to code in Tableau. Let's begin. Create a new sheet. Go to Duration Seconds, click on the drop-down menu and select Create Calculated Field. I'm going to call it Duration Hours. And I'm going to take duration seconds and divide it by the product of 60 and 60, which is the number of seconds in an hour. Right-click on Duration Hours, select Create Bins. I'm using the suggested size and hitting OK. I'm dragging duration hours to columns and duration hours bin to rows. I'm changing the measure for duration hours from sum to count distinct. I'm going to transpose this so it's easier to see and getting rid of the null value. I'm changing the axes labels. So instead of distinct count of duration hours, I'm going to say number of UFO sightings. The tooltip is a little bit hard to understand, so I'm going to edit the text. I'm typing seen for how many hours? And number of UFO sightings. I'm going to change up the order so it's a little bit easier to understand. I'm also going to edit the title, and I'm renaming it to Duration Bins. Sometimes automatically binned data isn't the most helpful. For example, we can clearly see in this graph that most UFO sightings last from 0 to 976 hours. The range is just too big to produce any solid conclusions. We can solve this issue by programming our own metrics into Tableau. So far, most of our programming has occurred in the tooltip. However, this lesson has nothing to do with the tooltip. Rather, it is about measures, which in Tableau are quick calculations we can run on data. We created a measure a few minutes ago when we converted duration seconds to duration hours. To get started, let's look at if statements. If a condition turns out to be true, then a piece of code is executed. If that condition turns out to be false, we can move on to the else if condition. If the else if condition turns out to be true, then we execute another piece of code. If all of these conditions turn out to be false, then we execute the lines of code under else. At the end of the if statement, we see the word end. This is the most important part of an if statement. It lets Tableau know your if statement is done. Without this, Tableau thinks your if statement goes on forever and will produce an error. What do I need in an if statement? You need an if to signify you are beginning an if statement. You also need an end to let Tableau know you are done coding an if statement. You don't need an else if or an else, but they do add extra functionality to your code. Notice how if, else, and end are all in caps. Also, the word then specifies where the condition ends and the executable line or lines of code begin. Use then after an if condition and else if condition. Do not use then after an else. Conditions are contained within parentheses. I tend to use indents when writing if statements. Indenting code is not necessary. Your code will still run without them. However, indents do make your code more readable, which may come in handy when you are troubleshooting your code. If you are using multiple conditions, you can add one of two words. You can use the word and in your condition. For the then code to run, all conditions have to be true. You can also use the word or in your condition. For the then code to run, either code must be true. The first condition could be true and the second condition false, vice versa. Both conditions could be true. Either way, your then code will still run. Now, before I finish going over programming, I would like to highlight one key difference between measures and tooltips. When you want to reference data in the tooltip, you use angle brackets. When referencing the data source in measures, you use square brackets. Create a new sheet. Call it custom bins. Go over to duration hours, click on the drop-down menu, and select Create Calculated Field. Change the title to Scene 4. I will begin my if statement. So if, and the condition will be duration hours is greater than 0, and duration hours is less than 0.5. Then this UFO was seen for less than 30 minutes. Make sure to type end to let Tableau know you are done. Drag scene 4 to column. Press Control while selecting it to duplicate it. Change measure to count. Drag out the axis label so you can see it. Now we will just keep on editing the code and seeing how this graph changes. So I will add an else if condition. Else if duration hours is greater than or equal to 0.5 and duration hours is less than 24, then this UFO was seen for a few hours. A new column got added. We are going to add a second else if condition. Else if duration hours is greater than or equal to 24 and duration hours is less than 168. Then this UFO was seen for a few days. Now I am going to go ahead and add my final piece of code, and that would be my else. Notice how I am not adding any conditions or a then after my else. I am just typing 1 week plus because Any UFO categorized here would have failed to make any previous condition true. Here, I am just rearranging my labels so they make a little bit more chronological sense. If I select one, I can get a zoomed in view. Now I am going to change the color to a dark pink hue and edit my y-axis label so it reads UFO sightings. I am also going to change my tooltip because it looks a little funky. So my second line will become my first. And instead of count of scene 4, it will read UFO sightings. Thank you for listening to me talk about binning and coding. That video wraps up part 2 of my Tableau course and learning how to create basic visualizations. In my next video, we will be going over how to aggregate these basic charts and graphs and maps and turning them into really complex visualizations. Until next time, bye.